My name is Christina Jimenez, and I am an attorney over in Texas. And every Monday morning at 7 a.m., Mr. Floyd and myself, we get together and we answer different questions about family law, just to try to do our best to spread information, give some general knowledge about some of the cases that we deal with, and hopefully at least give people a little bit of a leg up when you are unfortunately having to go through either a custody battle or divorce suit or something like that. Floyd, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Josh Floyd. I've been practicing for 9 years. 9 years.
Yeah.
We primarily do family law, and that's me. That's what I do.
And today we also have Bryan. Bryan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Bryan. I've been practicing for about 7 years. I come to that number because I've been married to a lawyer for about 14. So that gives me qualification. No, I'm kidding. I'm actually Christina's husband. And so she invited me to this, and hopefully I can add some value.
So here's the thing. Whenever I kind of made the decision to ask you to join, the reason why I wanted to do that is because I do think that you have valuable insight when it comes to these types of cases. So number one, before we got married, Bryan was married, and unfortunately that marriage resulted in a divorce. And
is it unfortunate? Because if it hadn't,
well, I think it made it unfortunate for them at the time. Not for me now.
Okay. Just trying to figure out the dynamic. That's all.
Okay, very good. And so, but I very much remember, and I kind of think, like, when I was thinking about this over the weekend, that maybe that's one of the reasons why I am so passionate about these types of cases. And anytime there's any sort of like alienation or like denial of possession, and it just makes me really angry. And thank the Lord we never had those issues with you and with your ex-spouse, because she always was really gracious. But I do remember those drives back from Lubbock when you were having to leave Taylor for the weekend, and how hard that was on you, and how hard the whole process was on you. And so, I mean, I guess, that's why I wanted to kind of have you in on some of these questions, because I think that you can add a different insight as opposed to just our legal opinions on stuff, right? We have never, neither one of us, Floyd and myself, have never been through something like that. So do you want to kind of talk about that a little bit, about your experience?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, to answer, Josh, in your initial comments, it was fortunate and unfortunate. I think just like anything in life, there's when you have a failure, you can choose to look at it as a time to learn, or you can choose to kind of fall down that hole. And luckily for me and a lot of the support I had around me, which is huge, by the way, I was able to pull myself out of that hole and to this point having a great time with a wife like Christina and my family, all that stuff. But yeah, as far as being a divorced dad, I always say that although I do think it's the wrong thing to abandon your children, no matter whether you're divorced or not, I do think I understand a lot those dads that make the choice to stay out of their child's life, as hard as that is, because, I went to San Antonio to finish my bachelor's degree right after my divorce. And so Taylor, because it was the right situation for her at the time, stayed with her mother in Lubbock. And San Antonio, Lubbock are a good 5.5, 6 hour drive away. And so, yeah, it took a big commitment from me and my ex-wife to be sure that we stayed with that, even though the emotion was very raw, and changing mine and my daughter's relationship at the time took a lot of strength from both of us. And so, absolutely, it was difficult. And so I think a lot of people that are going through a divorce deserve that empathy, deserve that sympathy, that no matter what the reasoning for it, no matter what the, who's right or wrong, it's a tough time, and you can get through it, but saying it's not tough or discounting that is kind of fantasy to me. So.
Yeah, I remember those rides home were pretty rough. And then the other reason why I thought that maybe you could provide some some additional insight is because, as you said, we have been married for so very long, 14 years. And the whole time that we've been married feels like
Right, it's about time to think about a change, but
not funny, Floyd. um, but you know, it's so number one, I think anytime you're in a marriage for any extended amount of time, it's difficult, right? And I know because I deal with divorces every single day and I talk to people. And when I'm talking to them, I'm not just talking about the actual process of divorce. I'm talking about what led up to the divorce, like what was going on in your relationship that caused you to finally get to this point. And I do think that it's one of the reasons why I think you and I have worked pretty hard to try to stay on task, and we haven't always been great on it. But I think that you also have that kind of interesting dynamic in that you've been married with me, what I do for a living, you hear all the freaking chaos and everything that I deal with. And then on the back end, having to, I guess, navigate that through therapy for 14 years. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, first off,
Bryan.
disclaimer. First off, Christina's an amazing wife, no joke. She's an amazing mother. It's been a change for me because growing up as a man in 2020, being married to a woman who is very interested in her career has been kind of walking down a path that's never been cut before in a lot of ways. I grew up in a small town with parents who kind of had an old-fashioned lifestyle where mom stayed home, and so it's been a challenge. But just like I've always said, anything worth having in life is not going to be easy, and Christina and being her partner is worth having, right? And so Christina referenced as far as therapy, I'm a big believer in when you need help, asking for it. And Christina and I have been in therapy off and on for about 14 years, and sometimes we've let our marriage get to the point where we needed to go to therapy.
Mostly been on though, honey. There's not a lot of offs.
Sure.
Good answer. Good
Yeah,
answer.
it's all perfect. It's all roses and lollipops, right? But no. But there's times even when things are going well that we check in with a therapist, right? Just like with my car, I take it to get worked on even when the tires aren't falling off, right? Because it's important not to let it get to that point, even though it does happen. So therapy, absolutely. I think there's a stigma sometimes in society about asking for help. I don't really understand that, but at the same time I do. So yeah, absolutely. Therapy's been amazing for us. I'm sure we'll continue to work on ourselves as life continues to throw us curveballs. And I still get every time I bring up to friends and I might be having a beer with a buddy, they say, "Oh, what does your wife do?" And I say she's a divorce lawyer. And I think 90% of the time I get, "Oh man, you better be cool about that. You better not let that go." So yeah, I think society thinks it's probably tougher, or somehow, being married to you is somehow tougher than being married to any other partner. Every marriage has its issues. So it's always funny when I get that. I think Josh said it a few times too.
Yeah, I don't know if that's so much because she's an attorney or just because Christina is the way she is, makes it very difficult to be around.
That's fair. I'll take that. That's fair. So with that being said, let's start getting into some of these questions. So question number one, can I modify the custody agreement if the non-custodial mother is absent? I gained custody of my 5-year-old when he was 2. The non-custodial mom hasn't ever paid child support. She was inconsistent with the visitation through the first year until she stopped picking him up or seeing him at all. It's going to be 2 years of her not coming. She visits me, or she messages me twice a month asking how he is and that she misses him so much. She says every now and then that this day she is going to come, that she is going to video call him, but she always has an excuse to cancel it. One of her daughters got sick, something spilled on her clothes, etc. I've been discussing with my wife about the possibility of moving to another city. I would like to move to another state, Pennsylvania, and my wife would like to move to Austin to go to school there someday. We want to know if there's any chance in moving the limits from the custody agreement. Right now, we can only live in Dallas. It doesn't make sense to stay tied to a custody agreement with a parent that is simply not trying to be present. She was gone before he was able to speak. My 5-year-old doesn't remember her and believes his stepmom is his real mom. What are my options? Floyd.
Ooh.
I feel like we should switch the format. Like I should ask the question and then you should answer it. So I'm not talking so much.
I see that you start that on a very lengthy question that has many parts. Yeah, that's a good time to start.
Thank you. Thank you.
You couldn't have started on question 2 that's like 2 sentences long, right? That's the question you want. Okay.
That's why you should pay attention at all times, Floyd.
I was paying attention.
Okay.
However, this could go many different ways. So what are my options? First option is you can look at a termination, right? One of the grounds for termination is non-compliance with a court order for a period of 12 consecutive months. Essentially what that would do is remove mom completely out of the child's life. You stated that.
Hold on, non-compliance with an order? What do you mean?
If they don't pay child support for a period of 12 months.
Okay.
So if there's a court order for child support and they don't pay child support for a period of 12 months, that can be a ground to terminate. You do have to be able to show that they had the ability to comply, right? Which can sometimes be the difficult part. But the advantage to a termination is you had stated that your 5-year-old believes his stepmother is his mother anyway. So it would just remove mom altogether and it would make legal what is really happening already, right? The stepmom would then become the legal mom. That's the benefit of it. The downside, I guess, would be if something happened between you and stepmom. Right now, she can fight for custody and you may have to pay her support if she wins, and she would have to pay support, vice versa. So termination, option 1. Option 2, you could just seek a modification. Ordering some type of step-up visitation, some notice provisions, things like that. But more importantly, it looks like you want to be able to move out of state. So you could ask to remove that geographical restriction. And I think with the showing, if you have evidence to prove what you're saying here, which she hasn't really been around, I don't think most judges are going to make you stay to a restricted geographical area. And I don't think you'd have trouble getting some type of supervised or step-up visitation. But that's the way you should go. One of those 2 options.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was thinking as I was reading this is it's probably better for him to make a move sooner rather than later, right? Because if he waits too long and if biomom starts exercising visitation, then all of a sudden courts are going to be mostly inclined to not allow him to be able to relocate. So there's a code provision in the Texas Family Code Book that basically says that the goal of the court should be to ensure that parents have a constant and what is it, Floyd? Constant and continuous relationship.
Close and continuous contact.
Same thing, tomato, tomato, but that's the burden, right? Or that should be the ultimate goal. And so that's why geographic restrictions are ultimately imposed. And so whenever you have a situation like this, gentleman, when one parent is not really being active in that relationship, then the concept of close and continuous contact is kind of resolved on its own, right? Because mom's not exercising this close and continuous contact or having that relationship with the child when she has ample opportunity to do so. So that's why in these types of cases, GOs can get lifted. But if mom starts coming around and exercising her visitation pursuant to the order, then the judge may say, well, listen, for 4 or 5 years, she wasn't doing what she was supposed to do, but now she is, and I'm going to give mom a chance. Most judges are going to always give that person a chance. And I know for dad in this situation is probably incredibly frustrating, but that is what most courts are going to do. So, as far as a termination, Floyd, I guess a court could, but I think that if they filed for termination and then mom showed up to try to contest it, Yeah.
Yeah, I think you definitely want to do the modification first, right? But kind of as a long-term goal, look at termination in the future, but certainly do the modification to protect your child now so that they're not having to, I don't know what the possession order is, but go to overnight visits and things like that, allow you to move or whatever. But I think termination is a real possibility in the future. I wouldn't do it before the modification, because with the termination, they get court-appointed attorney and the burden's a lot higher and things like that. But I would certainly do the modification and then kind of look at a termination.
Yeah, and I mean, just to take the time to kind of talk about geos in general. So everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people, they get really, really frustrated with this idea of, well, why do I have to stay in the Metroplex, right? Why do I have to stay in this city? It's my life. I should be able to move and to go wherever I want to. And my response to them is always, well, you can. Like, you can go wherever you want to, but your kid can. They have to stay here, right? Because it's not really binding on the parents, binding on the child. And I think it's important for you to attempt, and it's really, really difficult sometimes for clients to do it, but to attempt to look at it from the inverse, right? If your ex had the child and was trying to move across the country, how would you feel about that, right? The other thing is that I kind of understand and I kind of don't, and I'm kind of on the fence of this, but if, you know, we had a client once who, her husband was in the military and he was stationed in California, and she had a geo to West Texas, and she really, really wanted to move to California. And in that case, she wasn't able to do so. And she and her husband had a child, you know, that was born between them. That's why they wanted to relocate to California. And even that wasn't sufficient. And I think it kind of depends on the court, right? Some judges have different perspectives on it. But yeah, I mean, if you can ever render at the onset of your original custody agreement, if you can try to make that geo as big as you possibly can, if you are the primary conservator, always going to be helpful potentially if you're anticipating a move. If you are the possessory conservator, so the person that has visitation, you need to make sure that you're trying to fight to keep that geo limited. So Bryan, you actually have some personal
objection. Interrogative. Is that what you say? Lord, no.
I'm gonna go with improper objection.
Overruled.
Goodness. All right. If we were doing bird law, then I would totally have it. But anyway, no, I'm trying to be funny. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got a little bit different perspective, obviously. You know, I think me and my ex-wife, my co-parent, right? One thing that I will say that we're very happy, or at least I'm very happy about what we did as co-parents. And now our daughter's 22 and she's, you know, we're not having to co-parent as much. You're always going to have, your child will always be a part of that other party, in my opinion, right? I think it's obviously not my opinion. It's physical, psychological, all that. And so I've always tried to give my ex-wife as much grace as possible from that perspective, even when it was definitely me giving more than I should have, you know, because no matter what, our daughter will always desire a relationship with my ex-wife, no matter what she's like, no matter what negative things she might do. There's a psychological impact to my daughter if I were to not let that happen, and then give as much grace as I can to try to encourage that, right? I do understand that there's some situations where it's just not possible, and to protect your child, you do have to do some things legally. But I think I've got a different perspective, and reading this particular story, I guess my coaching, if that's what I was doing, would be, you know, if you've got to do something to better your life for your child, then I think you should make those legal and adjustments, right? But it sounds like, just from the message, that there's some wanting to move to Pennsylvania and some future dreams about Austin. If they're not locked down and you can't, you know, prove to yourself that that's what the right thing for your child, then maybe giving some grace to your ex-wife a little, that she's going through something, and that your son or daughter, my apologies, is going to want that relationship, and maybe give her enough grace to try to let her get through what she's going through for your child. because it is tough to co-parent. And I think, like I said, as much as your new wife or your girlfriend is very good to your child, and that's amazing, that's good for her. Your child still wants a relationship with their parent and will desire that, and their mental health or psychological health will be really impacted by your decision to give a little more grace when you can. It's just my thought.
So you actually had this geo situation come up in your with Taylor, and basically in Bryan's case, mom had been limited, I want to say, to Lubbock, right? She was limited to Lubbock.
Yes.
And then Bryan,
Lubbock
when they divorced, he moved to San Antonio to finish his degree. And so what typically happens in these geos is a parent will be limited or confined to an area, right? So what's the county again?
Lubbock
County.
Oh, yeah, I need that. So Lubbock County, so if so she was limited to Lubbock County, and if dad moves out of Lubbock County, then the geo was lifted. And so in that particular case, and I think if I remember correctly, this was a long time ago, but in your order, it didn't have the language that the geo would automatically be lifted. It had that she was limited to Loving County. And so she had to take you back to court. And this is when we were still dating. And she requested that that geo be lifted so that she could move to Pittsburgh with her new husband. And I think she was having a child at the time as well. I think she was pregnant when all that happened. And so
I think maybe, yeah.
In that particular case, we didn't have much like leverage. There was really nothing that we could do because Bryan had already relocated outside of that geographic area. And so it was kind of this thing of, well, you know, she's probably, if we go to court and we argue that she's probably going to be able to move. And so we ended up trying to negotiate a deal the best that we could to make travel arrangements and to make sure that we were getting as much visitation as we possibly could. But that was also really, really tough.
Yeah. Let me add a little color there. You know, I think we didn't fight mostly because at that time, because I was still trusting my ex-wife. And what's ironic is I was just coaching your questioner about giving grace to their ex-wife, and that's what I did at first, right? And with the notion that trust would be kept on the other side. And so the way my ex-wife positioned it was that they were trying to find a job for her new husband, and just were having trouble in Texas, but he could find one in Pittsburgh, and that she didn't want to move there, but temporarily, so they could support their new family, they would move there, and within about 18 months to 3 years, they'd be back in Texas. And so as painful as it was, and with the factor of we might not do well in court, and once again, trying to be as give as much grace as I could, I kind of okayed it without a fight. And then, yes, I think in another 3 years, when it became very clear that that wasn't the plan to move back to Texas, in fact, they made another decision to move to Boston at that time. I finally, you know, my grace kind of ran out as far as that, and I needed to do something to protect our daughter. And that's when she moved in with us, and she's about 10 or 11. Yeah. And luckily at that time, I was dating Christina. Christina was knowledgeable enough that we found a good lawyer in Lubbock and positioned ourselves to be in the right place so Taylor could have the choice to move here. And so, it's a tricky one for sure, but I do think the key feedback would be sure you're paying attention to that as you exit a marriage legally, because it can get you.
Well, and so, you know, kind of speaking on, so number one, we weren't dating when Taylor came to live with us, babe. We were about like 3 or 4 years in, something like that.
I'm gonna now. See y'all later.
At home, and we had kids, like it was kind of a thing. It's a little bit.
Bryan, I got you. Call me.
I'm always dating my wife, so we're still dating today, sweetie.
There you go,
honey. But so when Taylor hit around 11, she had already kind of started voicing to mom and to us that she wanted to move to Texas. And so we were very cautious. And so, you know, I always speak about like don't speak negatively to mom or about mom. And don't try to get in the kiddos' heads and try to convince them to say or do something. Like, I just think, guys, from a litigation perspective, that's an absolute disaster. But more importantly, from a parenting perspective and the impact that you're having on your kiddos, it's an even worse decision to make. And so when Taylor kind of started voicing that, we were very clear with her, like, listen, when you come for the weekends, we're out at the movies and the putt and doing all the fun stuff. But when you live with us, it's not going to be that way. This isn't, Disneyland, right? And so kind of gave her several months before we actually made that move, right? And when we were making that move, Bryan, you were, communicating with Christy and kind of saying like, hey, what do you want to do, before you even involved attorneys. And then the other thing that I will say is, knowing that you had a really good opportunity to kind of take advantage of that situation and to basically, make things really, really difficult on her, on mom. You didn't do that, right? You, from a financial perspective, you carried the brunt of it. From a travel perspective, you carried the brunt of it, because I think you knew that it was really going to be difficult. The dynamic of her coming here was already difficult enough, and you didn't want to kind of kick her when she was down. Now, perhaps she will feel significantly different about that situation, but from a lawyer's perspective, there were a lot of things that you could have done that you didn't do. And I do think that that's important.
I think what you're referencing, and we paid for travel to from Texas back to Boston, I guess at least once a quarter, and some holidays. Really that wasn't even difficult for us to say yes to. She may not have even asked for that, but it is important to me that my little girl keeps a relationship with my ex-wife. So.
Yeah, and let me touch on that real quick, because you were talking about the GO, Christina, and how as a managing conservator, you want to try to get as large as you can, and as a possessory, as small as you can. I'm going to disagree with that. I think that if you are legally, yes, that's what you should do. But if you're really looking after what's best for the child, right? What's best for the child is to be close to both parents. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but if you move 100 miles away, basically you're eliminating the other parent's ability to coach extracurricular activities, attend school events, go eat lunch with the kid at school, right? All these little things that one parent misses out on because one parent chose to take the child and move 100 miles away, right? A lot of times it's whatever county you're in, and contiguous counties like Dallas and contiguous counties, that could be 200 miles, right? I mean, surrounding counties, to still stay within that geo. And so I think if you're looking at it from what's best for the child, you want to be as close as you can, right? So that if they're both good parents, right? Be as close as you can so that both can be actively involved. You can rely on one another to help out with pickup and drop offs, and hey, I've got an emergency, can you watch the child today, or whatever, right? I think that's what's best for the child. Strategically speaking, yes, Christina, you are correct. From a strategic perspective, you would want a big geo if you're managing.
But from a human being perspective?
From a human being and what's best for the child, you want that as small as possible so both parents can be involved.
So, but here's the thing.
I agree.
Hold on though. Here's the thing. So what if mom is a teacher? I don't know. And she's living in a really small remote county in West Texas. And she has an opportunity to go to Houston and make 3 times the amount of money that she's earning right now. And bio dad is paying, nominal child support. And the kiddos are stuck living in a shack because, she doesn't make enough money. And when they move to Houston, this new school that she's going to be teaching at is a private school that's going to set these kids up for an Ivy League education. So best interest doesn't necessarily mean just being close to the other parent. There's so many different factors that you—
I disagree.
Well, agree to disagree, because here's the other thing. Dad could move to Houston And we have had fathers who have done that before, and we've had mothers who have done that before, just to be close to their children, because they ultimately knew that that relocation was in the best interest of their children.
Well, so in that scenario, if both parties were agreeing, yes, but I think it would be a very extreme circumstance when you could convince me it's best to move a child away from a good parent. I don't
Yeah,
care.
I think what it,
life, you know.
I think the operative term in what you said, Christina, was best interest, right? I mean, there's an argument that being close to your father and your mother is of more interest in an Ivy League education and the extra income that might come from Houston. Right now, that's a very vague line to even throw out without the real data, but I think it depends on what your definition of best interest of the child is, right? And so some people think that going and driving these big drives towards an Ivy League education and more money is the way to go. And I completely get that. You need money to pay the bills, and we live in a society where you gotta have money to do things. But at the same time, is there value to having both parents near that child that will end up keeping that child in a good mindset throughout their life, in a happy place, money or not, right? So I think I'm kind of in the middle of you, Josh, on that.
Well,
that means he's more towards me, but for the sake of the marriage, he's going to go in the middle. I got you, Bryan.
I'm okay with that. So, but like, for instance, in this question that we asked many moons ago, if you have a parent that is not really active, right? Even if you have a parent that's coming, twice a month to see the kiddo for a few hours, under your logic, oh, well, we have to stay because it's always better for the kid and the geo. That's what you
my logic. Don't twist my words, Miss Jimenez. Okay.
You literally just said that the geo, it's always going to be in the best interest for two parents to be near one another.
Now, what I said if you have two.
Where's the court reporter? We need you to read the transcript, please.
Two involved good parents, right? If you have a parent that is only seeing their child once a month, and if you move to Houston and get a better education, and they still get to see their child once per month, you're not having any impact on the parent-child relationship, right? But if you have an active father or mother, whatever the case may be, that is going to the football games, is going to the parent-teacher conferences, and you move to Houston and take all that away from them, that's where it's detrimental.
Yeah, I just don't think, and with everything that we do, Floyd, this, it's never black and white. It's gray, like all different shades of gray. And so we have to, and that's why I guess we forgot to give our little disclaimer that we normally give. But what we say when we're talking through these scenarios is, number one, this isn't legal advice, right? We're basically talking through fact patterns. But secondly, you need to go and you need to talk to an attorney about your specific fact situation, right? Because it could be one little nuance that you mentioned that could change the entire trajectory of your case, right? And so, like Floyd said, if dad has standard visitation, but he can only come once a month because of his work schedule, and you have this golden opportunity, then maybe the courts will be inclined to let you do it. If dad's seeing him every Thursday and every weekend, and he's the coach of the football team, probability, even if you get remarried and want to relocate to California to be with your military husband, probably not going to happen, right? And so we have to, whenever we're going through these scenarios, we really do look at everything holistically, right? And we try to give our best guess as to what we think a court may do. But I will tell you that, there are plenty of times when I've thought a judge is going to do something and he doesn't, or she doesn't. So, talk to a good lawyer that is there local in your area that practices before your judge, because they'll be able to tell you, like, yes, do this or don't do that. Because I know some of my judges, you're not getting a geo lifted. Like, just don't even ask, don't waste money. It's never going to happen, right? I also know that there's other judges that are inclined to grant geos or remove geos if you have the right fact pattern. So talk to a good lawyer in your area. And Floyd and Bryan, we will agree to disagree. Honey, we'll talk afterward, okay?
Don't do it.
Yeah, sure we will.
You need off at 8 o'clock for therapy sessions?
Yes, call my
Yeah.
okay, so my final divorce decree.
Wait, my turn to read the question. Remember, I'm reading the question and then you're answering the question, right?
I think I want to go to number 3 then. Let's go to number 3. I'm just kidding, go.
My final divorce decree was issued by the judge May 2007. In it, my ex was supposed to pay me 50% of his 401k retirement. I would like to know if it's too late to get my portion from the divorce. In the decree, the judge ordered my ex to pay me 50% of his retirement and pension. I never got the 401k. However, he changed jobs since then, but I never got my portion of the money. Is it too late to go after my portion?
I really don't like you right now. This is a very, very, I mean, I guess it's not complicated, but it's just difficult to navigate. So whenever you go through the divorce process, you have your final decree of divorce. That final decree of divorce is what's going to award you certain property, right? And in this particular case, 50% of this 401k that belonged to her husband, okay? Really best practice is when you file that final decree of divorce, you also file what we call a qualified domestic relations order, okay? And it's basically a separate order where the judge sends this into, or your attorney rather, sends this order into the plan administrator for the 401k plan. And they basically go through and they sign this order, and that's what gives you the right to be able to get your 50%, okay? And so basically what they have to do is, and the reason why it has to go through a separate order is because this plan administrator is kind of charged with figuring out, okay, what funds were put in during the marriage, what are any gains, what are any losses. It's this huge math formula, and then they come in and they say, all right, here's your award, okay? So best practice is always to do the quadro at the time of divorce. And I have had people who have said, listen, I don't have money to do this quadro because I just paid all this money for the divorce. And my advice to them is, you got to figure it out. We have to get this thing processed, because otherwise you end up in a situation like this. Now, we have had cases in the past where they've waited a long time to try to issue the 401k. And by the time they try to go in and get their 50%, the money's gone. Okay. Now, can you file a suit to recover that money? Potentially, but you know, there's this saying that you can't squeeze blood from a turnip. That's a saying, right?
Close enough. Yeah, go ahead.
What is it? Can't draw blood?
Can't get blood out of a turnip.
I mean, squeeze, draw, get. I feel like my adjective is more descriptive. So, or verb. Yeah, that's a verb.
Just agree, Josh. Agree. Just agree.
Well, you know, the whole thing with blood and turnips, that whole thing, right? So you can't, if he doesn't have any money, and if he spent all your money, then what the heck are you going to do? Right? Which is why you want to do it at the time of divorce, right? And so there's been plenty of times where this happens. We try to go after them years later. We figure out no money, right? The other thing that you can have, which is really a pain in the neck, is trying to trace if he has changed from one employer to another and those 401ks are rolling over. Trying to track down what he actually had in 2007 is a logistical nightmare, and you spend so much money trying to recover those funds in attorney's fees, and just for us to try to figure out what the heck to do with it. And so the short answer is yes, you can try to pursue it, right? You'd have to file it's a new lawsuit. What is it called, Floyd? Motion to enter qualified domestic relations order, something.
Okay.
Is that the Dr. Emmett Brown statute?
No, honey, I don't know what you're talking about, but okay, so you'd have to file a new lawsuit to enter the qualified domestic relations order, and then all of that headache that I just talked about would ensue. What you may want to do, if you know, if you find out that the money isn't there, if you find out that it's rolled over and it's too difficult to trace, you may just want to agree to a dollar amount just to try to get something out of those funds. The other thing, just on a side note, any gains or losses that that account has made, assuming that you can track it down, if it's made over the course of the past 8 years, whatever, you know, $20,000, that $20,000 will be yours. Now, what they're going to do is if it's granted, or once it's granted, they take your account, they sever it into your own account, and they can roll it over into an IRA or any other retirement fund that you ask them to do. So that way you get your money, he keeps his money, and everybody goes away.
So how do you feel about, in addition to under the family code, filing under the civil code for violation of a trustee relationship?
I mean, I like that idea, except it's the whole turnip thing.
Doesn't sound very trusty to me. I'm just throwing it out there.
And I've heard, have you heard of someone facing criminal charges for spending that money?
I have not.
No.
I have heard of it recently, actually, from somebody that we know very well. I haven't investigated it, but there was, recently I heard about somebody that faced criminal charges for that.
That's a good tease for the next episode, Josh. Investigation. Josh investigates. Josh, you haven't, don't they call that the Emmett Brown statute?
Oh my gosh, can you stop, please?
I
To
don't,
get the disclaimer of the dad jokes.
I forgot you don't watch movies.
I don't.
Back to the Future. You're going back in time. So Emmett Brown, right? Doc Brown? No? Okay.
Moving on. Oh, so the other thing that I will say is, if you're the husband, don't spend the money. Just don't. And I know that it's so very tempting, but just don't, because if it comes back that you did, well, it may be difficult to recover. If you have, you know, a second home or other vehicles or whatever, they can try to levy all of that stuff, potentially criminal charges. I think absolutely attorney's fees would be awarded. There's all sorts of different issues. So just do the right thing. Just do the right thing.
Well, so it's been 14 years, right? So what if he got divorced and that 401k got divided again between the new wife because the old wife didn't take her 50%?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a client in the past where it was like a year after the divorce and the wife still hadn't done the quadro. And he's like, what do I need to do to get rid of this money? Because I don't like the fact that my money's still commingled with hers. And if I keep waiting for her, she's never going to do it. So he just paid to do the quadro because he just wanted it split and he didn't want to have to mess with it because he wanted to take out a loan and he didn't know how much he could take out. And it was just a disaster. So there's always that option too, if you're the husband and you don't want to find, you know, have issues down the road. So Floyd, what are the odds of me getting custody of my children? My wife constantly threatens to take my kids and move away while I'm out of town working. She has a problem with alcohol. She gets highly intoxicated, alone with the children, and once I caught her leaving the children home alone while intoxicated. She has claimed to be suicidal on 2 different occasions. I recently found out that she has attempted to cheat on me with men and women. I filed for divorce and have a temporary order in place that states she can't take the children out of our county. Do I have a good chance of getting primary, or am I going to lose my children because I've worked out of town in construction primarily for 5 years?
Oh, geez. Loaded question. Wow.
Yeah.
It depends. Can I go with that answer? You're on mute. Thank God. Finally. You found the mute button, Bryan?
No. Am I on mute?
No,
Yeah,
Christina is.
Me. So yes, you can go with it depends.
Okay, so yeah, it depends on a number of things, right? So one is how old are these kids, right? Are we talking 15 and 17-year-olds? Or are we talking 1 and 3-year-olds?
Why does that matter?
Well, because if they're like 15 and 17, leaving them home alone, not a huge deal. If they're 1 and 3, kind of a big deal.
But if she's like, highly intoxicated, threatening to move away, having suicidal ideations. You don't think that matters if they're 15 and 17?
No, I don't think it matters nearly as much as if they're 1 and 3, because a 15 and 17-year-old, if they are having problems or if their life is in danger, they can generally pick up the phone and call and say, hey, dad, mom's lost her crap. Where
But
a 1
you
and
don't
3-year-old,
think that that's like detrimental to their emotional and mental welfare?
yes, but not as detrimental to a 1 and 3-year-old. A 1 and 3-year-old can't go to the kitchen and grab a sandwich if they're hungry because mom's passed out on the couch, right? 15 and 17-year-old, they can drive to the store. Well, 17-year-old, not 15.
Okay.
I think it's two different things. And
Also, this idea that a 1 and 3-year-old, if all this craziness is happening, they're probably not going to remember any of that. Whereas the 15 and 17-year-old, they're like in it at that moment. So
I don't think Josh is saying that there's no impact on the teenagers, but to a judge, right? His analogy of the sandwich.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. I don't know, like you two ganging up on me all morning. I don't know how I feel about this.
No, it's, to me, if I could give my perspective on what's going on here, it's an interesting story, right? That all these issues with mom, it definitely sounds bad, and it sounds bad to any age kid, right? But the last part about construction out of town, that's an interesting question I'd want to dig into as far as the human side of this, right? If these situations are so dire as a father, isn't it easier, at least initially, to change your employment to maybe construction in town? If the children are in such danger, why not go there first before maybe disintegrating a marriage? Even though it does sound from the perspective of this writing that mom's in a really bad situation.
Did you say disintegrating a marriage?
Sure. Yeah. Pulling out the ray gun and just shooting it right in the heart. Absolutely. I know you guys are good at that, like the Wild West.
Dissolve it, but we don't disintegrate. That's like
sometimes we disintegrate.
Yeah. No, you act like I hadn't been around for 14 years. I've seen some destructions happen for sure.
So are you basically saying that dad should come home and take care of his wife and try to make that whole
Not necessarily. I think every marriage should make every adjustment to stay together before it's time to divorce. And I don't think that divorce is obviously anything wrong if it needs to happen. But I think too many times we look to that answer versus some adjustments we might be able to make in our lives. And so that's what I'm saying. Just from this perspective of this paragraph, that last piece, if I'm a father and I have an employment out of town where I have to travel and I see this going on at home and I've made a commitment to this family, I'm probably going to make some sacrifices first before going to that, the death penalty, if you will, for the marriage, right? And now, is there grace after that, and there's a way to recover, as I told you when we started this? Absolutely. But that definitely pauses me, and obviously having a deeper conversation to get a better picture of the situation would be important. But that's all I'm saying. That was peculiar to me about that story.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of reminds me of a case I had a few years back out in West Texas, where the children, dad was a better dad. The children weren't as well off with mom, but dad worked in the oil business, and you know how that is, right? I mean, it's long hours, late nights, sometimes gone for 14 days at a time. And so we had this very, very difficult conversation at the beginning. I was like, if you want your kids, you need to change jobs. Well, I can't make as much money. I don't care. You got to decide what's more important. This dude started driving for Pizza Hut, delivering pizzas, and got custody of his kids, right? And so that's kind of what that reminds me of. I mean, if you feel like your children are in danger, start working locally. You have to decide what's more important to you. Right? Is it more important that you're out of town in construction making $150,000 a year, or that your kids are safe and you're at home making $15 an hour? So yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting point. But the other thing is there's already a temporary order in place, right? And so presumably all of this was brought up at the temporary hearing. What is that temporary order now, right? How much of this evidence did the judge already hear? And what was the ruling, right? So mom can't leave.
I think that was a TRO, Floyd. It says temporary order, but I think that it's a TRO. That's the way I read it, because he's asking if he has a good chance of getting primary.
I was thinking at a final.
Okay.
Why would there be a TRO that says she can't take the children out of the country?
Out of our county.
Oh, okay, yeah, county, country, kind of the same thing, just one letter. It's really all that is different. So,
Okay.
Okay, so I think it depends. I mean, I think that if you're able to establish all of this stuff, and assuming there's nothing bad against you, because there's usually two sides to every story, save and accept you working out of town and you're willing to move back in town to make sure your kids are taken care of, you have a chance. Different judges view mental health differently, right? I mean, some judges take it very, 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 I think they all take it seriously, but some judges are more forgiving, right? If someone's getting help. And some are, I guess, less forgiving. So maybe.
So the thing that whenever I was listening to the question, these types of situations are so tough because, so number one, he filed for divorce, right? And this is where I do think that it's important that before you make a move, like you should be consulting with a good attorney that knows their stuff when it comes to family law, right? Because I cannot tell you the number of times that I've done a consultation and somebody comes in and they say all the stuff that this gentleman said, right? Well, this is what she's done, this is what she's done. And I say, okay, prove it, show me. What do you have? Well, nothing. She just told me, she called me, my kids told me, but I don't have any proof. I can't do anything with that. And once you file, then you don't have any evidence. And so what happens when you walk into the courtroom? Mom comes in and says, I would never have done that, would never do that. He's lying because he doesn't want to pay child support. And you're coming in and you're saying, well, no, absolutely not. She did do this. And, she called me and I didn't record it because I was just worried about my wife and worried about my kids. And I wasn't thinking about that at the time. And then basically what the court is left with, he said, she said, who do I believe? Don't really know, but I do know that dad's been gone most of the time. Mom's been there with the kids. And even if all this stuff was true, then why would dad continue to leave the children alone with mom? And I'm going to go ahead and award the children to mom because dad's always away. And now you have left your children in a very unsafe situation, all because you didn't stop to take the time to gather the evidence before making the move, right? And so, and I see that a lot with young attorneys where they're so like overzealous, right? They're anxious to get their things on file and they're like just gonna make a move. And then when they show up to court, they don't have what they need. So make sure that you're talking to your attorneys about the strategy before you walk into that courtroom. And I tell all of my clients and all of my attorneys, we want to win that case before we ever step foot in the courtroom, right? I want all my ducks in a row to where they can't really wiggle out of this situation, but for whatever path I'm giving them, right? So that's the thing that concerns me about this case. I think if he doesn't have any of that stuff, he loses all day. So
yeah,
nobody has anything to say.
I think they should definitely stop, drop, shut them down and open up shop.
Oh, I said
That's
end
great.
roll.
That's good advice.
Like, okay, well, so Floyd,
I remember Professor Jimenez saying that very explicitly. It's good class.
Okay, so Floyd, can you sue my wife's lover for causing emotional stress, alienation of affection? My wife got caught while cheating on me. We had a wonderful marriage until then. Can I sue her lover for the stress he caused? Alienation of affection in Texas.
First of all, you're rude.
Can I take this one?
8 questions in between that one.
I know, but it was such a good question. We had to get it in. We have 5 minutes.
Go ahead, Bryan.
I mean, this is not a legal answer by any means, but it's funny being Christina will tell me the highlights of all the things she's done, and I find a similar thread in some I would say, tough divorces or parties that take it tougher, and that is trying to force the other party to make emotional decisions through litigation, right? In other words, if at the point where your partner's making that strong decision, and once again the caveat disclaimer is that every situation is different, making a decision to violate your trust and your respect like that, maybe your time and money is better spent on improving yourself, right? And finding that happiness that you want outside of somebody that's making that really egregious decision. Now, have I seen relationships come back from something like that? Absolutely. And that's for every singular relationship to decide. But I don't want to make light of the situation because I'm sure it's hard on both parties involved. But at the same time, yeah, I would coach a person if I was just having a beer and telling them what to do. It's like, hey, don't waste your money going to pay a great firm like Jimenez Law Firm to help you, make them do something. Why not take that money and invest in a gym membership and maybe read some books and better yourself for the next partner, right? So for what it's worth.
Honey, I think that you're not quite understanding what we're trying to do by hosting these Facebook events. The idea is that maybe people will want to come and hire us.
He's definitely decreasing our clientele.
This will be my last time on the podcast, so I appreciate you letting me.
So we always say we don't encourage divorce, but good God, Bryan, we do need to make a living.
Well, I mean, there may be a divorce to be had in here. I'm not saying that, but trying to compel somebody to be the person you want her to be through litigation. So, I mean, there's money in it for you.
I feel like maybe we should become counselors, Christina.
I feel like so too. Yes. But I would say, like, in a case, if this guy came in and said, "Can I sue for emotional distress?" I would say no, or maybe I'm not the attorney to do it because I just don't know that it would be fruitful and that it would be a good use of your money and a good use of your time.
There is a cause of action for alienation of affection.
I know.
I can't tell you what the elements are because we don't do that. But I think this would fit, right? If anything is, and I don't think it's because you have affection with an alien. I don't think that's what it is.
Oh my God, I can't with the dad jokes on a Monday morning, guys. Can y'all please stop? Make it go away.
Yeah, so I would certainly refer them to a civil attorney or bring in a civil attorney to help me litigate the divorce along with the civil causes of action. But yeah, I just don't know enough about it.
But see, this is where, I don't know, like we have cases all the time when people will come in and they'll say, like, I want to pursue this and this is why I want to do it, right? And I mean, I can't even tell you the number of times when I'm talking to clients or potential clients and I'll tell them, don't do it, right? Like, I understand that you're upset. I understand that you're frustrated, but this is not in your best interest to move forward. And then I'll kind of lay everything out. Like, here's what's probably going to happen. Here's your net gain. Here's your ROI. And at the end of this, all that's happened is you have run yourself through the ringer for really nothing. And I think so number one, I always have a problem when people come to us and they're upset with the mistress or what do you call a man that has the affair? Like not the mistress.
The mister?
That's what I was thinking. Is it a mister?
Mysterio?
I don't know. What do you call him? That's weird.
Pimp?
No.
Not pimp.
No, not
Playa?
Playa with an A.
That's bad.
Okay, well, whatever.
Okay,
When you blame the other person for the affair. I mean, I understand they have a role to play in it. I get it, especially if they knew that this person was married. But really, the person that violated your trust was your spouse, right? And so if you're going to go after anyone because of the emotional stress and all of that stuff, then perhaps what we do is we fight for a disproportionate share of the marital estate, saying like, look, judge, we understand that typically courts are going to go 50-50 when dividing up all assets. We want a little bit more money because they had this affair. And here's everything that I went through, you know, my depression, my anxiety, my therapy, all of this stuff that I went through because she did this. I think that that is a more viable cause of action. It's more probable that you would recover on that claim. And it's something that you have to go through anyway if you're going to dissolve the marriage. But so again, with the whole therapy thing, I tell people all the time that when you're going through a divorce, it is the equivalent of death. And especially if you're in this gentleman's situation where it's the ultimate betrayal, right? The one person that was never supposed to do that to you has now done that. And your life, as you saw it for the next 20 to 50 years, it's dead, it's gone. And so the mental impact that it has on you is immense. And so, like Bryan said, instead of focusing on going after the mister, we're going to focus on our mental health and making ourselves better, recovering through this trauma, and then accomplishing great things. Yeah. See?
Yeah.
So with that being said, it is about that time, gentlemen. So thank you so much, Bryan, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Floyd, as always, thank you.
De nada.
So we always have to give our lovely disclaimer here at the end of this. Basically, as we always say, don't take this as legal advice, right? Go seek out a local counsel, visit with them about your particular situation, and make sure that you're hiring somebody who is strategic, who has your best interest in mind, and who's going to go above and beyond for both you and your kiddos. So y'all have a wonderful week, and I will be talking to you all soon.
Toodles.